Adebimpe barely slept that night. Her mind was racing, replaying the terrifying contents of the box. The skull, the blood-stained fabric, and the bundles of money painted a grim picture. She had married a man who was hiding something truly dark, and now she didn't know what to do. Her heart pounded every time she thought about the moment Alo looked her in the eyes and warned her to stay out of his business. "He knows," she whispered to herself. "He knows I touched that box." She tossed and turned in bed, listening to the sound of the night. The crickets chirped, the wind blew softly, and everything seemed calm until she heard a faint whisper. "Bimpe." She froze. The voice was soft and chilling, like someone was calling her name from afar. "Bimpe, come." She sat up in bed, her chest rising and falling with fear. "Who's there?" she whispered into the darkness. The room was still. Then she heard it again. "Bimpe, come." The voice was coming from the hallway. She stood up slowly, her legs trembling. "Maybe it's my imagination," she said, trying to calm herself, but the whisper grew louder, more insistent. Summoning all her courage, Bimpe stepped into the hallway. The light flickered slightly, casting eerie shadows on the wall. The voice led her toward the secret room, the one she had promised herself never to go near again. "Come." She reached the door, her heart thudding in her chest. The door was slightly ajar, as if inviting her inside. "No, I can't do this," she whispered, stepping back. But just as she turned to leave, a loud thud echoed from inside the room. It sounded like something heavy had fallen. Her curiosity won over her fear. Slowly, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was just as terrifying as the last time she had seen it. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow faintly, and the air was cold and thick. At the center of the room, the large pot sat ominously, the same one from which the dark figure had emerged before. Adebimpe's eyes darted around, searching for the source of the voice. She saw nothing unusual until she noticed the pot's lid was slightly tilted. Her breath caught. Did something come out? She wondered aloud, her voice barely audible. Just then, she heard a low growl behind her. She spun around and saw nothing. "Who's there?" she called, her voice shaking. The growl came again, louder this time, but still there was no one in sight. The room seemed to close in on her, and the air grew colder. Suddenly, the sound of a car engine startled her. She realized it was Alo returning home. "Oh no," she gasped, rushing out of the room. She hurried back to the bedroom, her heart racing. Moments later, she heard Alo's footsteps in the hallway. She sat on the bed, trying to look calm, but her body trembled. "Bimpe," Alo called out as he entered the room. "Yes," she replied, her voice barely steady. "Did you go near that room again?" he asked, his tone sharp. "No," she lied, shaking her head. Alo stared at her for a long moment, his eyes piercing. Then he smirked, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Good," he said finally, "because if you ever do, you won't like what happens." She nodded quickly, but as he turned away, she felt a chill run down her spine. The next day, Adebimpe visited her mother. She hadn't seen her in weeks, and she needed some comfort. She didn't plan to tell her everything, but she hoped being around her mother would ease her fears. When she arrived at her family home, her mother greeted her warmly. "Adebimpe, my daughter, you are looking thinner. Is everything okay?" "I'm fine, Mama," Adebimpe lied, forcing a smile. As they sat down to talk, An old man from the neighborhood, Baba Shegun, walked by. He paused when he saw Adebimpe. "Ah, Adebimpe," he called, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Good afternoon, Baba Shegun," he greeted him. He muttered, shaking his head. "You are married to Alo, aren't you?" "Yes," she replied cautiously. Baba Shegun's expression grew serious. "Be careful, my daughter. That man, he's not who you think he is." Adebimpe's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" The old man hesitated, then shook his head. "Just be careful. That's all I can say." Her mother frowned. "What are you saying, Baba Shegun? Alo is a good man. He takes care of my daughter." Baba Shegun sighed. "Sometimes wealth comes with a price. Be wise, Adebimpe." He walked away, leaving Adebimpe more confused and scared than ever. That night, back home, Adebimpe lay awake, thinking about Baba Shegun's words. What price did Alo pay for his wealth? She wondered. She remembered the whispers, the growls, the terrifying contents of the box. Her instincts told her she was in danger, but she didn't know how to escape. As she drifted off to sleep, she heard the faint whisper again. "Bimpe." Her eyes snapped open, but the room was silent. "I need to find out the truth," she whispered to herself before it's too late. The suspense in her heart grew, and she knew the answers lay in the secret room, but would she survive the truth? Adebimpe's unease grew with each passing day. Alo's strange behavior and the whispers in the house were eating away her peace. She wanted to confront him, but fear held her back. Instead, she had decided to find out the truth about the secret room once and for all. One afternoon, Alo came home with a suitcase. His face was tense and he seemed in a hurry. "Bimpe, I have to travel to Lagos tonight," he said, dropping the suitcase on the floor. "Lagos? So suddenly?" she asked, surprised. "Yes, it's business. I'll be gone for a few days. Just take care of the house while I'm away," he replied, avoiding her gaze. She nodded, trying to act normal, but her mind raced. His absence meant she had the perfect opportunity to explore the secret room without being caught. That night, after Alo left, Adebimpe lay in bed, restless. She kept hearing Baba Shegun's words echo in her mind. "Be careful, wealth comes with a price." When she finally drifted off to sleep, she had a vivid and terrifying dream. In the dream, she was standing in front of the secret room, holding a key. As she opened the door, a dark figure emerged from the port at the center. It had glowing red eyes and sharp claws. "You dare disturb us?" the figure roared, reaching out to grab her. Adebimpe woke up with a scream, her body drenched in sweat. Her heart raced as she sat up, gasping for air. "It's just a dream," she whispered, trying to calm herself. "But why does it feel so real?" Despite the fear the dream had planted in her, her determination to uncover the truth only grew stronger. The next morning, Adebimpe waited until the house was completely silent. She checked the locks on all the doors to make sure no one could disturb her. Then she went to the secret room. The door looked as menacing as ever, with its strange carvings and heavy lock. She held her breath as she reached for the spare key she had taken from Alo's drawer. With trembling hands, she inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The click echoed through the empty house, making her shiver. Slowly, she pushed the door open. The air inside was cold and smelled of something rotten. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow faintly, and the pot in the center of the room looked even more sinister than she remembered. Adebimpe stepped inside, her heart pounding. She noticed several items scattered around the room. Small fingerings, red candles, and bowls filled with strange powders. But what caught her attention the most was a large blood-stained cloth hanging on the wall. As she moved closer to the pot, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The pot was sealed with a lid, but something inside seemed to be moving. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Suddenly, she heard a faint whisper, "Leave now." She froze, her eyes darting around the room. The whisper grew louder, turning into a deep, guttural voice. "You shouldn't be here." The lid of the pot began to rattle. Adebimpe stumbled backwards, her legs shaking. Before she could run, there was a loud knock on the front door. The sudden noise broke the tension, and she bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind her. She rushed to the door and opened it, only to find Baba Segun standing there. "Baba Segun?" she asked, surprised. The old man looked at her with concern. "I had a dream, my daughter. A bad one. Are you okay?" Adebimpe hesitated. Dawn nodded. "I am fine." "Let me come in," Baba Segun said firmly, stepping inside without waiting for her permission. He looked around the house as if searching for something. "What are you looking for?" Adebimpe asked nervously. "The spirits here are restless," he replied. "Your husband is involved in something dangerous, isn't he?" Adebimpe's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to do, Baba. There is a room, a secret room. Don't go near it again," Baba Segun interrupted, his voice stern. "You are not strong enough to face what's inside." "But I have to know the truth," she cried. The old man shook his head. "The truth will destroy you. Listen to me, Adebimpe. Stay away from that room and leave this house while you still can." After Baba Segun left, Adebimpe sat in the living room, torn. She wanted to run, but where would she go? How could she live without knowing everything? As night fell, she heard the whispers again. This time, they were louder and angrier. "Why did you disturb us? Why are you here?" She covered her ears, trying to block out the voices, but they wouldn't stop. The room grew colder, and shadows danced on the walls. Adebimpe knew she couldn't ignore the danger any longer. She had to make a choice: leave the house and never look back, or face whatever evil lurked in the secret room. Her decision would change her life forever. The night was eerily quiet, yet Adebimpe couldn't sleep. The whispers in her mind grew louder, their tones urgent and accusatory. She paced the living room, her hands trembling. Baba Segun's warning haunted her. "The truth will destroy you." But how could she live without answers? What if Alo's wealth was tied to something dark, something that could harm her? She decided she couldn't live in ignorance any longer. In the middle of her thoughts, she heard the rumble of a car engine. Peering through the curtains, she saw Alo's sleek black car pulling into the driveway. He wasn't supposed to return until the next day. Her heart pounded. She hadn't locked the secret room properly after rushing out earlier. She quickly sat on the couch, pretending to be calm as Alo walked in. "Bimpe," he called, his voice unusually cold. "Yes, my love," she replied, forcing a smile. He dropped his briefcase and stared at her for a long moment. "What did you do while I was gone?" Her throat went dry. "Nothing much. I stayed at home, cleaned a little." Alo's eyes narrowed. "Are you sure? Did you go anywhere you weren't supposed to?" "No, I didn't," she said quickly, her voice cracking. He walked past her towards the hallway. Her heart raced as she watched him head to the secret room. When he reached the door, He paused and turned the handle. The door creaked open. Alo stepped inside, and she held her breath. Would he notice she had been in there? After what felt like an eternity, he came back out, his face unreadable. Good, he muttered. Everything is in order. The next morning, Alo sat at the dining table, sipping his coffee. He seemed distracted, his fingers drumming against the cup. Alo, Adebimpe said hesitantly, can I ask you something? He looked up, his expression cautious. What is it? What's in that room? She asked, her voice shaking. Alo's face darkened. Why are you asking about that? I feel like there's something you're not telling me, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. He slammed his cup down, making her flinch. Bimpe, some things are better left alone. If you love me, you will trust me. But I'm your wife, she cried. How can I trust you when you're hiding things from me? Alo stood up, towering over her. If you knew what I have done to give you this life, you wouldn't be asking these questions. You'd be grateful. She froze, his words sending chills down her spine. What do you mean? What have you done? She whispered. Alo didn't answer. He stormed out of the room, leaving her more terrified than ever. That evening, Adebimpe tried to process everything. A knock came at the door. She opened it to find a man, dressed in a long black robe. His face was stern, his eyes cold. Is Alo home? The man asked, his voice low. No, he's not, she replied, trying to steady her voice. Can I help you? The man smirked. Tell him the priest is waiting. He knows where to find me. Before she could respond, the man turned and disappeared into the night. Later that night, Alo came home, his mood darker than before. Without a word, he went straight to the secret room. Adebimpe, unable to contain her curiosity, followed him silently. She watched from a corner as he unlocked the door and entered. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then she heard a strange chant coming from inside the room. The air grew colder and a faint red glow seeped out through the crack in the door. Adebimpe's knees felt weak. She couldn't turn away. She moved closer, peeking through the crack. Inside, she saw Alo kneeling before the pot, his hands raised. The pot bubbled and dark smoke rose from it, forming the shape of a terrifying figure. You must deliver soon, the figure growled. Your time is running out. I understand, Alo replied, his voice trembling. I'll make the necessary sacrifices. Adebimpe clapped her hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. She stumbled back, accidentally knocking over a verse. Alo rushed out of the room, his face livid. Bimpe, what are you doing here? She fell to her knees, sobbing. What are you, Alo? What have you been doing? He grabbed her by the arm, pulling her to her feet. I told you to stay out of it. Stay out of what? She screamed. Human sacrifices? Dark rituals? Is that how you got your wealth? Alo's face twisted with anger. You don't understand what it's like to be poor. I did this for us, for our future. But at what cost? She cried. He let go of her, his shoulders slumping. It's too late to stop now. If I fail to deliver, they will take everything, including you. Adebimpe stared at him, horrified. What do you mean, including me? Alo avoided her gaze. I promised them a sacrifice. If I don't fulfill it, they will take you instead. Adebimpe's world shattered. She realized she had married into something far darker than she could ever imagine. As Alo paced the room, muttering to himself, she knew she had to find a way to escape before it was too late. But could she outsmart Alo? and the forces he had unleashed? The clock was ticking, and every second brought her closer to an unthinkable fate. Adebimpe couldn't eat or sleep. Her heart raced with fear, and her mind was filled with thoughts of escape. She knew Allah would never let her live alive. Worse, the dark spirits he had allied with seemed to have their own plans for her. That night, as Alo snored in the bedroom, she quietly slipped out and made her way to the kitchen. She needed a plan, a way to escape before it was too late. But where would she go? Who would believe her story? Her thoughts was interrupted by the faint sound of chanting. She froze, realizing the noise wasn't from her husband. It was coming from the secret room. Curiosity got the better of her. With trembling hands, she tiptoed towards the room. The door was slightly ajar, and she could see the pot bubbling in the center. The dark smoke from before had returned, swirling in the air. "Who's there?" she whispered, voice barely audible. The smoke suddenly took shape, forming a face, twisted and cruel. "You're trapped, girl," it hissed. "Your husband's pact has sealed your fate. There is no escape." Adebimpe stepped back, her legs shaking. "No, I didn't agree to any of this." The spirit laughed coldly. "It doesn't matter. His promises are your body now. Run if you wish, but the darkness will follow you. There is no freedom." Before she could respond, the smoke vanished and the room went silent. Determined not to give up, Adebimpe decided to seek help. She thought of her childhood pastor, Pastor Adeboye, a man known for his prayers and wisdom. Early the next morning, she pretended to go to the market, but instead headed to the church. When she arrived, Pastor Adeboye was surprised to see her. "Adebimpe, my daughter," he said warmly, "what brings you here so early?" Tears streamed down her face as she knelt before him. "Daddy, I need your help. My life is in danger." Pastor Adeboye led her into a quiet room and listened as she poured out the entire story. How she had married Alo for his wealth, how she discovered the secret room, and how she overheard the spirit's warning. The pastor's face grew serious. "My daughter, you have entered into a covenant of darkness without knowing it. But there is hope. God can deliver you." "How, Daddy?" she asked desperately. "You must first confess your sins and ask for forgiveness. Then you will pray together. But you must understand the forces you are dealing with will not let you go easily." After hours of prayer, Pastor Adeboye gave her a bottle of anointing oil and instructed her to sprinkle it around the house, especially in the secret room. "Whatever you do, stay strong in faith," he said. "Do not fear, for fear is their weapon. And remember, God is greater than any power of darkness." When Adebimpe returned home, Alo was waiting for him. His face was dark with suspicion. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I went to the market," she lied, holding up the basket she had filled with random items. He studied her for a moment before nodding. "Good. We'll be hosting some guests tonight. Make sure everything is ready." Her stomach churned. She didn't dare ask what he meant by guests. Instead, she quietly obeyed, biding her time. That evening, as Alo entertained his mysterious guests in the living room, Adebimpe sneaked into the secret room. Her hands trembled as she poured the anointing oil around the pot and the walls. She whispered prayers under her breath, asking God to protect her. Suddenly, the room shook violently. The pot began to bubble, and a deafening roar filled the air. "How dare you defile this place?" the spirit growled, its smoky from reappearing. "I am a child of God," she shouted, her voice filled with newfound courage. "You have no power over me." The spirit screeched, its form flickering Adebimpe continued praying louder and louder until the smoke finally vanished. The noise drew Alo's attention. He burst into the room, his eyes widening at the sight of the oil and the overturned pot. "What have you done?" he roared, grabbing her by the arm. "I broke your covenant," she said defiantly. "I will not be a part of your evil anymore." Alo's face twisted with rage. "You have destroyed everything. Do you know what you have done? They will come for us both now." "I'd rather face them than live like this," she replied, tears streaming down her face. Suddenly, the house began to shake. The lights flickered, and a cold wind swept through the room. Alo's expression turned to terror. "It's too late. They're here." Dark figures began to emerge from the walls, their eyes glowing red. Adebimpe clung to the anointing oil, continuing to pray as the figures closed in. Alo fell to his knees, begging the spirits for mercy. "Please give me another chance. I'll do whatever you want." But the spirits ignored him. Their leader, a tall shadow with fiery eyes, pointed at Adebimpe. "She is free," it declared, "but you, Alo, belong to us." Alo screamed as the shadows engulfed him. Adebimpe watched in horror, but she kept praying until the room fell silent once more. When the ordeal was over, Adebimpe collapsed on the floor, exhausted but alive. She looked around the room, now empty except for the broken pot. She knew her life would never be the same, but she was free. As she left the house, the sun was rising, casting a warm glow over the city. Adebimpe felt a strange sense of peace. She had survived the darkness and found her way back to the light. Her journey wasn't over, but she was determined to start anew. Adebimpe sat on the church pew, trembling as Pastor Adeboye placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Her ordeal with the spirits had shaken her to the core, but she was alive. Alo, however, was gone, swallowed by the darkness he had served. The church was quiet except for the sound of her soft sobs. "Pastor, I feel empty," she confessed. "I don't even know how to move on. My hands are not clean." Pastor Adeboye knelt before her, looking into her eyes. "You have taken the first step, my daughter. You chose to walk away from evil. Now you must live a life that pleases God. Your story is not over." Days later, the news broke out in Ibadan. Alo's mansion had mysteriously collapsed overnight, leaving behind only rubble. Neighbors claimed they heard screams and saw strange lights before the collapse. The police found nothing but ruins and charred objects. Among the debris was a broken shrine pot, its surface covered with cryptic markings. A ritualist's house. One officer muttered as reporters swarmed the scene. The story spread like wildfire. People whispered about Alo and his wife, Adebimpe, wondering if she had been involved in his dark deeds. Adebimpe moved to another part of the city, far from the shadows of her past. She found a small job and began rebuilding her life. She attended church regularly and spent her nights praying for forgiveness and healing. But the memories haunted her, especially the faces of the innocent lives taken for wealth. She couldn't escape the guilt. One evening, as she sat by the window, a knock came at the door. It was her old friend Ronke, who had warned her about marrying a fraudster. "Adebimpe, are you okay?" Ronke asked, concern in her eyes. Adebimpe nodded slowly. "I'm alive, but I don't think I will ever be okay. I made choices that destroyed lives." Ronke held her hand. "You can't change the past, but you can change what you do moving forward. Maybe God spared you for a reason." Later that night, Adebimpe had a vivid dream. She was standing in the ruins of Alo's mansion. The dark spirits surrounded her, their voices echoing. Why were you spared? One asked, its tone accusing. I don't know, she replied, trembling. A light suddenly shone from above, and a voice said, you were spared to be a testimony to warn others of the consequences of greed and evil. When she woke up, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She decided to share her story, not to glorify her mistakes, but to help others avoid the path she had taken. As Adebimpe stood before a group of young women sharing her journey, she ended with this: ladies, I wanted wealth and comfort, but I didn't ask what it could cost. I turned away from what was right, and it almost cost me my soul. So I leave you with this question: what are you willing to sacrifice to get what you want? And will it truly be worth it in the end? The room fell silent as her words hung in the air, leaving everyone in deep thought.